Hey guys, Steve from Unexplored Films here, and today we are going to try and add me into some of our favourite movies, just like Quentin Tarantino did with Rick Dalton, Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now, we are not just going to add me to these movies, which is simple enough if you just want to put yourself into the background of a scene, but we are going to do what Tarantino did and do a full actor replacement, and have me interact with the other characters. So we first need to find a method of erasing the original actor, creating a clean background behind them, and then dropping in my new performance, which we're going to film in front of a green screen, over the top of this. Now, this effect is somewhat similar to what they did in Forrest Gump when they added Tom Hanks into some historical footage, and you can check out my video on that, and it's also similar to the technique that can be used to complete the performance of an actor who dies during a film's production, such as Oliver Reed in Gladiator. But the main reason I wanted to try this effect was it just sounded really fun. And if you're enjoying these DIY Hollywood effect tutorials, please consider subscribing and you won't miss any, and thanks for all the amazing support so far for this channel. So the first thing I needed to do was to try and find some key scenes in films that I could try this effect with, and this was partly down to the movie clips I could find available online. I knew I wanted to use the scene from The Great Escape that Tarantino had done, and I also selected the art gallery scene from Skyfall where Bond meets Q, the scene in The Wolf of Wall Street when Jordan and Donnie are sitting on the couch together, and the scene from The Departed where Matt Damon and Leonardo DiCaprio are in the lift. In all of these cases, I was looking for scenes where two actors were appearing next to each other where I could replace one of them and where there was some good possibilities for interaction, and I was also looking for scenes that were either filmed on a tripod or were at least pretty steady. This is really going to help when erasing one of the actors and recreating the background. The first thing I did was open each clip in Premiere and save a freeze frame each time the actor made a big movement. This is because each time they move, they are basically revealing a new part of the background, and we're going to use all of these to create a composite of a clean background without the actor. Next, I opened the frames in Photoshop, and there are a couple of ways we can try and remove the actor. If you use the lasso tool to cut out a certain area, Photoshop will actually have a go at using content-aware fill to replace the area with what's around it. However, as clever as this was, it doesn't get it completely right, and I preferred to do it manually. So if you duplicate your layer and turn off the layer at the bottom before you do the cutout on the top layer, this will just leave a blank space, and Photoshop won't attempt to fill in the gap itself. Next, I could take my other freeze frames from the same scene where the actor had moved. I could once again cut out the actor, and I could overlay these, and pretty soon I had a background where most of the actor was already missing. And this just left a very small part that I had to cover up, which you can do using the clone stamp tool to copy and paste areas of the nearby background. Once you're happy with your blank background, you can save this as a new still image. So I repeated this process with all the different clips that I had selected to try this effect with, and the great thing about doing this first is that when you come to do your filming, you can be testing the clips immediately to see if they work. And if the actor doesn't move very much in the shot that you're hoping to create a background for, you may be able to find a very similar background in another shot and just use a bit of that to fill the gap. The Wolf of Wall Street also included this foreground element of this low table, so I cut that out as well as a separate layer because I knew eventually my performance would have to sit behind it. Okay, so now we need to add our still background back into our footage and retain the elements that are moving that we want. So I opened the original shot in After Effects and dropped in my still background over the top. Now I could draw a mask around the German officer because of course we want him to still be moving, and his layer is going to now sit on top of the still background. So I just had to keyframe the mask a little bit to match his movement, and because his shoulder is in front of Steve McQueen's jacket, I had to keep the mask really close to his shoulder for that part. So I did this for all the characters who were going to still be moving in the shots next to me, and keyframed them up to their edges if the character I was playing was going to move directly behind them. And then for any shots that move slightly like this one, we need to track the movement of the take. So for that we can use the motion tracker markers, and if you want to learn about that in more detail, check out my video on adding set extensions to miniatures. So now we can create a null object with the camera move and attach the still background to the null object, and it will move in exactly the same way as the original take. And that was all the edit prep done, and now it was time to start the filming. So this wasn't a massive room that we tried it in, and usually with a green screen you want as much space behind your actor as possible so that you don't get the green spill onto them, and you need room to evenly light it, but in the end we were able to basically do even lighting with two large lights on each side at the top corners and two smaller lights on the bottom two corners. We also had a large key light with a softbox on it, and that was going to be my main light for copying the lighting in the original films. And a couple of small battery-operated LED panels, which we could use as backlights and fill lights and that sort of thing. If you can, set your camera to shoot the same frame rate as the original clips. Also, I decided to shoot in a flat picture profile because I knew I was going to do a lot of color correcting and I wanted maximum flexibility in my shadows and highlights. And I also did a little white balance test first, just to check that the whites that I was getting was pretty similar to what I was seeing in the original films. So looking at the original scenes from the films, I could work out a few things. I could basically work out the height of the camera and the distance and roughly the focal length they had used. I was also looking at the directions the light was coming from, and I could use that to try and create something similar with the lights that I had. I also tried to copy Steve McQueen's eyeline. Now he's looking at the German officer, so I actually set up the monitor where I could see what I was filming as my eyeline, and that was really helpful because that gave me a point to look at, and I could also check that the shot was looking good while I was doing the scene. Next, I had to learn the timings of the original clip because my performance had to be the same length and I had to say the lines in the same place so that when I added it into the original clip, everything would match. I found the easiest way to do this was to play the original clip on a loop, and listening to the audio, I could talk and move in time with the original clip, and I could record several takes until I thought I had one that worked. And this was a bit like learning a dance. And I assume this is how Tarantino did it as well. I didn't worry about the audio, I thought I could re-record that later.
10 days isolation helps.
Can't helps.
20 days.
Right. Oh, you'll still be here when I get out.
Once I reviewed the takes and thought I had one that worked, I could then move on to the next shot and the next lighting setup. For the reverse shot in The Great Escape, the sun is now camera left from this top corner, so I switched off my main key light and just used one of the small LED panels to be that light at the side. This time I could basically face the green screen but still see the monitor and film over my shoulder. For the scene in the art gallery from Skyfall, I added a bench so that I would be sitting and just lowered the camera to the height of the actors in the original scene. The action here was a handshake, which luckily you don't see, and then handing Bond a letter. And then for the close-up, I just had to rotate the bench slightly, and again try and match the eyeline by using the monitor as my focal point. For the scene in the lift in The Departed, it kind of looks like there's a main light in the middle of the lift ceiling. So again, I used one of the small LED panels to try and replicate that, and because Leo has basically caught Matt Damon and he's kind of holding him in handcuffs and making sure he doesn't escape, I held my jacket up at head height to give me somewhere to focus, and it had the added benefit of adding a little bit of shadow onto my shirt. The Wolf of Wall Street clip was harder because the camera had to be further away and it had to look like I was sitting on a couch. So rather than try and recreate this in the same space, I simply moved the lights and the green screen and shot this sitting on my real couch. It meant that I could have my hand at the right height with some cushions under it, and I didn't need to move much in this one anyway, so I figured I could probably mask out anything that was a big problem. So I loaded my takes into After Effects and could line them up with the originals by either using the audio or by turning the opacity down to halfway. And then as usual I could use key light to remove the green screen. For this you select a fairly average part of the green colour to remove, and then under Screen Matte you can use Clip Black and Clip White to refine this further. And you might also want to adjust screen softness and screen shrink and grow just to make the edge a bit nicer. Once you remove the green screen, you can then draw a basic mask around your figure to get rid of anything that you don't want in the frame. I could use the original actor to line up my new performance in basically the same place. And if you scale your performance to the right size, you should be able to match pretty well with what was there originally. Next, I could add the Lumetri color effect and set about trying to turn my flat footage into something that looked basically like the original. So this was a little different every time, but if you experiment with things like the exposure, the temperature, the tint, the contrast, and the saturation, you should be able to make the colors look more like the original. Another method I used was to open the color wheels and try and match specifically the highlights to the original highlights, the midtones to the original midtones, and the shadows to the original shadows. You can switch back on the layer with the original actor to really try and get those colors as similar as you can. This color matching is probably one of the best ways of trying to sell that you're in the same frame and that you're interacting with these famous people. And if you put your lights in the right place to begin with, that should also do a lot of the hard work for you. If it's an older film like The Great Escape, you might want to add some blur or some grain or dust and scratches to try and match the old footage as best as you can. And then for any shots that move, remember to parent the layer with your new footage to the null object you made which has the shot's movement, so that your character will be moving with your blank background and everything else. Finally, I went back into Premiere and did my sound design, so I simply clipped out the lines that were spoken by the original actor and re-recorded them in rooms that sounded similar. For any clips that are set outdoors, try and re-record these lines outdoors as well.
Oh, you'll still be here when I get out.
And because old sound recordings often sound less bassy than what we can do today, I found that also adding a slight high-pass filter took out some of the bass, and again that just made it match a little better with the original audio.
10 days isolation hills.
Captain Hills.
20 days.
Right. Oh, you'll still be here when I get out.
Cooler.
007.
Feel anything?
No. It's been 35 minutes. I am killing you. And that was pretty much it. That was my improvised method for erasing the original actor and adding myself into these films so that I could interact with the other actors. And if you've enjoyed this one, why not drop a comment below about what Hollywood effect you would like to see recreated next. So guys, please hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this. It means a lot, and thank you for all your amazing support for this channel so far. I've been Steve from Unexplored Films, and I will see you next time.